So I'm really relieved that I've got a bit more time to try and do all the key concepts in 20 minutes. It's going to be a little challenging, I have to say. So it's really great to be here. Because we're quite short of time, I won't do the boring story of how I got into data governance. It's really exciting to me. But I think that the really short version is I'm really passionate about data governance. I can really see the benefits that it helps people do. And I'm just so lucky I get to do my ideal job now of helping a whole variety of people do data governance in their organisations and train people so that they're able to do it themselves. So I'm very lucky. And to carry on my mission of getting everybody to do data governance properly, I'm going to start today by just running through some key concepts so that when we get to hear the case studies later on, which are usually invaluable, I haven't heard the ones that we're going to hear today, but it's always great because it's nice to know that you're not the only one struggling with the challenges of data governance. So, but if we kind of go through some key concepts, so hopefully we're all on the same page before we start. I was going to say it's still quite a lot to get in 20 minutes, so let's ask questions, but if they get too long, let's kind of cover them at tea breaks and lunch breaks. If we've got a little bit more flexibility, please shout out. I'd rather have an interactive audience than just sitting there going to sleep, particularly the first session of the day. So, what is data governance? You've all turned up for a data governance event, so does anybody want to share with me what they think data governance is? Nobody knows. Nigel should know, he's presenting. Anybody, no, but you just decided it sounded interesting, you thought you'd come along.
Managing your data with authority.
Oh, that's a nice succinct one. I like that one. Everybody agree? That's a nice lady over here is willing to talk.
Yeah, it's the rules, processes, and procedures that I did mention around the creation, storing, changing and that nice definition of data.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we got two really useful definitions there. When I first did my own training course, probably about 3.5 or 4 years ago now, I was still a bit naive in terms of, so I wasn't naive in data governance terms, but naive in what I needed to do a course. And I thought, I don't need to write a definition, because when I started doing data governance, which is 13 years ago now, I googled data governance. There was one entry came back. This was all to do with a scientific study on penguin data. Has anybody googled data governance recently? How many rows do you get back? Exactly. I can't even find my penguins anymore. I wish I'd saved it, just for old time's sake. There's some really useful things on the internet. There's also some less useful. But I thought, I don't need to write a definition. There's some very clever people out there that have written some really good ones. So I had a little rummage around and tried to find some. This is the first one that I found that's looked good to me. What do you all think about that one? Wow, that's the quickest anybody's ever said that. I normally have to read it. I get bored halfway through this, and I hope you're getting the message already that I'm really passionate about data governance. This isn't really going to be overused because the people that you're going to be talking to about this haven't heard of data governance before. If I get bored halfway through this, what are business users who've never even heard of data governance? So we kind of scrapped that one. I had a bit of a look around, and I came up with this one, and I can't remember where this one came from. It might be the Dharma Dictionary of Data Management Terms. It's very possible. What do you think of that one? Much shorter, so we address your problem back there, sir. A few more nodding faces. So thinking what I just said, you're going to be facing a user. Would you feel comfortable saying that to a user? Would it help them?
It's all dry.
Yes, it's very polite, isn't it? It's a bit dry, and it's not going to get anybody excited about it. It's hard to get people excited about it, even as a data governance geek. So I reluctantly came to the conclusion I did have to write my own definition, because actually data governance means different things, and it depends on where you are in your journey. It's a long, slow cultural change. So what does it really mean? Well, a bit like this lady says here, it's about proactively managing your data to support your business. It's all about helping your business achieve what it's trying to achieve. I mean, it's often things like improve turnover, reduce costs, things like that. But if you don't have the right data, how do you know you can make the right decisions? So that's where I think we are. Anybody who really disagrees or wants to go now? Julian and Leo, kill me for letting people escape.
It seems a little empty and vague. There are lots of keywords in there. Managing your data, what does that mean? It doesn't say anything at all to me. It just said, oh, it's a pack of cards. What is it? Support your business as achieve its strategy and vision. Okay, that's the purpose for holding it in the first place, which might be master data management as opposed to data governance. And so, managing, in what way do I manage my data? So this is, I think, is too simple and doesn't tell me what I might need to.
Yeah, I think I totally get what you're saying, and I think I start from here and then tell them, because it depends on what you're doing and where you are in your journey with every single organisation. And if I gave you the full proper definition, like the first one, you switched off and you haven't tried to pick up in there, oh, well, that might mean the master data we're trying to do or we need. So I start from this and then add the detail. It's all about context and adding the detail that's appropriate for whoever you're talking to at any one time. But I get what you're saying. So Lee, you had your hand up.
I did. It was about horses for courses, and a lot of us in this room have a very similar mindset. We want that level of precision. When you're trying to sell some of this stuff to business people, I agree with this. You need something to get them to engage. If you put too much on there, you want them to ask the sort of questions that you want, which is why I kind of like that. But people are different. You've got to adapt.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Might be a bit adversarial, but would it be better to say it's defensively managing your data?
Oh, no, I think data governance is actually proactively. Or do you mean it's because you're talking about perhaps the data breach, the protecting your data side of things? So the next slide might be interesting to you.
Is it important to differentiate data governance from data management?
Yes.
To me, that's kind of half the problem.
Yeah.
And the definition doesn't really do that.
No, that's a fair comment. So thinking back to the wheel that Lee was showing earlier, the DMBOK wheel, that's all the data management disciplines. People do very often get confused and use data management and data governance interchangeably. Data management is the whole body of data management disciplines, of which data governance is one. But data governance on the DMBOK wheel actually sits in the centre. Data governance is the foundation. So, much as this lady helpfully said for me, it's the roles and responsibilities, puts in place that framework that you can build everything else on. And that's why this is deliberately vague, because it depends on what you're focusing on at any one time. Primarily improving your quality of your data, but then you start adding all the other bits on when it's right for you to do so for your organisation. So it's probably a good time to go on to the what it's not, because I think some of these conversations might be why you said that. Data governance is often used interchangeably with a lot of other data management disciplines as well, not just data management generally. I always like to include this slide because a couple of years ago when I was at EDW in the States, there was a fantastic looking session. You would have all turned up to it because you turned up here. It's data governance, bridging the gap between business and IT. Oh, fantastic, this is my kind of session. Now the Americans, you know they don't do queuing. Sorry if there's any Americans in the audience. Go to a conference, they're in the conference room 10-15 minutes beforehand. It doesn't happen in the UK, that was a real shock to me. So I get there, there's one chair left, right over the front down here, there's no side aisles. So I have to climb over everybody's bags, get sat down. 30 seconds in, it's really clear. It's a software vendor and they do data security software. I now can't get out because they're now sitting in the aisles, and I wasted half an hour of my life. And so I could have been listening to somebody else's case study on data governance, which would have been much more interesting and useful for me. So this is just to kind of reiterate, data governance is used in multiple different ways. We're trying very much to get people to use it in the same way, but you know, people will pick up on things. And I think there's a growing focus on data governance at the moment. So you're finding, if you look on Twitter and LinkedIn, a lot of data security software firms are picking up on that and using data governance to describe what they do. So it isn't data protection or data privacy. There's a lot of work coming along on that in GDPR. So if you're at all interested in that, look into that. But it's not this. It's not data retention. I was talking to a lady from Aviva beforehand about records management. It's not records management. Records management is very similar kind of approach, but managing your paper records. And one thing I always get accused of every time I actually go in and do data governance at an organisation is, I suppose you could be big brother looking over my shoulder, looking at everything I do. And actually, no, that's not the case. It's never the case. As a data governance manager or data governance whoever in your organisation, you shouldn't be interested in looking at the data. Your job is to get everybody else to care about their data and manage the quality of it, not you. So these all need to be aligned with data governance, and if you have a good framework in place, you can hang these off of that because you've got the right people already identified to make the right decisions about those. So it's kind of what I said before, it's in the middle of the Dharma wheel, it's the glue that holds everything together and makes all your data management disciplines work together for the greater benefit to your organisation. So, in the interest of time, I can't tell you everything, but for me, the key thing is the what. What is it that you're going to put in place as part of data governance? And for me, that's the framework. And you'll see it's only one part of the 3 things that I think that you need to do. That's my methodology, but we don't have time to do that in 20 minutes. So we're just going to look at the methodology of a part of the framework. So I think the framework breaks down into 3 key things: the policy, the processes, and the roles and responsibilities, i.e. the people that are going to follow those processes. So we have a quick look at policy, because everything we're going to do in this session will be quick, is I think your policy is needed because you need to mandate what you're doing. Now, I first had my first ever attempt at data governance 13 years ago when I worked for Lloyds Bank. I didn't even know it was called data governance at that point. I just called it something to do with roles and responsibilities with data. Wasn't quite sure I could articulate it any better than that. And I had some degree of success because I think if you go bouncing into people's offices and really passionate about something and enthusiastic, you can drum up some degree of success. It wasn't sustainable because I inevitably came across people who said, do I have to do it? And that was a real shock to me because I'm thinking, why wouldn't they want to do it? Can't they see this is the thing that improves our data and makes everything right? But I've grown up a bit since then. I've had quite a bit more experience, and I realised that without the policy that gives you the authority to do it, there are always going to be some people that don't do it. And they might not necessarily be absolute resistors. They might be people that say, sounds really good, Nicola, I get why you're trying to do this. I'm just really busy at the moment. I've got this change programme. I've got a big project to do this. Can I do it later? Whereas if you have a policy, you've got the authority. So that when that person says, do I have to do it? You say, yes, we have a policy, group policy, you have to do this. My job is to help you comply with that. So policy is really important. I always try and break down a policy into a policy and an operating model. And who here's got a data governance policy or a data quality policy or something along those lines? Oh, not very many. How long are they? 3 weeks. That's what I was going to say. Many, many pages. And is it really, really easy to change policies in your organisation? Nobody's nodding. In my experience, it was quite painful to get policies to change. Data governance, implemented successfully, is an iterative thing. So you don't want to put everything in your policy because nobody will sign up to it. It's too big and too complicated to get started. You put something really light to get started, and then nobody will do any more than that, and it's really, really painful to change the policy at the time. So I try and put the what in your policy. So this is your high-level approach, and I try to keep this principle-based. Really basic things like all the data will have a data owner, that we have data standards, where to find them, that we have data definitions, where to find them, that kind of thing. And then I put the how we're going to do it in the operating model. And that document is a lot easier to get changed, and you can send that to your data governance forum, committee, council, whatever you call yours, and get that adapted, change the detail as you go. Then when you come to your annual review of your policy, because I haven't worked with a client yet that doesn't have an annual review for their policies, you've already got the underlying detail changed, so you give them the updated policy and say, you've agreed on the detail that supports this during the year, and your policy is the easiest it's going to get. Don't say easy, just easier than trying to make all those changes in one go. So, any questions about that? Oh, great. Hopefully I'm talking sense, not having sent to sleep already. So what kind of things do you want to put in your data governance policy? Well, that's going to depend, going back to our earlier conversation about where you are in your journey. I've worked with some organisations that say they want everything. They want the aspirational end goal in their policy. And if that's how your organisation works, then that's what you've got to do. Don't ever try and buck the trend. Data governance is challenging enough as it is. Try and keep how you do things normally. But I've also worked with companies that we can't do that because the day the policy signed off, internal audit will turn up at our desk and say, this. And they'll say, well, black marks against you, you don't meet all this, bulk of the policy. So you've got to think about what it should cover and where you are and what you're trying to achieve at any one time. But the kind of things I do put in there are the roles and responsibilities. And by this, I've just put a high-level description of what roles they're going to be and what they're accountable or responsible for. Not a detailed description, that can go in your operating model. If you have data quality standards that either you have to meet because of regulation or because you want to meet, because you know it's the right thing, you can call out in there that you will have data quality standards that you have to comply with. Are you all familiar with data quality dimensions? So if you are at all interested by the end of today, There is a really good white paper on the Dharma UK website on data quality dimensions. We had a working group a couple of years ago. Data quality dimensions are the way of describing the metrics, and Julian was involved in that as well. It was not just Dharma, we invited some other experts. Data quality dimensions are how you describe how you're going to measure the quality of your data. So we're talking about things like accuracy, validity, whether it's complete or not. It's a whole minefield of the subject, and the working group, I think we worked out we had over 100 years experience between us. We had consultants, practitioners who are doing it inside organisations and vendors, and it still took us an awful lot of work to whittle it down to 6 that we thought should be the starting ones that everybody could get their head around. But I won't kind of bore you with that this morning if you're not interested in that, but if you are, personally I think it's a really good paper. Julian was part of it as well as I think a couple of other people in this room. It really was a labour of love, but hopefully we've developed something that's useful to everybody afterwards. Finally, I would put the processes that you want people to follow. Same reason for having the policy. If you don't call out what processes you want people to follow, you actually haven't used that authority that you've got by having your policy properly. So I'd include a high-level description of them again, not the detail. And finally, I've said several times already, it's an iterative process. Your scope may be different when you first start to the end, so make sure your policy calls out the scope. It might be that you just do it over one division or department of your company to begin with, or maybe one domain. You might use customer data just or product data first. So call out in that what you're doing to try and make it manageable to begin with and evolve that over time. Any questions on that? Excellent. So, processes, I kind of mentioned them already, but this is just a case of, I've spoken to loads of people at events like this, particularly our own conference that Julian was mentioning earlier, and I've met people one year who said, oh, fantastic conference, I've really learned what I need to do, I'm going to go back and get data owners and it's great. I met the same woman the following year, and I went, oh, how's it going? Last time I saw you were all fired up, you're going off to sort it out, and she said, oh, it's rubbish. And, what do you mean it's rubbish? And she went, I got back to work the next day after the conference, and they went, right, you, oh, and you're data owners. Get on with it. They said, they didn't do anything. Right. You know, one, that's not the right way to engage your data owners, but secondly, she didn't actually tell them what to do. And even just telling people what to do, if you say, actually, you're responsible for improving the quality of your data, oh, and so are you both get it because you're here. But even then, who says you're going to be consistent about it? And you could have a way of doing it that's different than yours. I think nearly every company I've worked with, there are pockets of good data quality activities and the odd data governance activity going on. But if you don't do it consistently across the organisation, I've also seen it where somebody, for the very right reasons, has claimed some data and caused somebody else a problem. So you need processes to make sure that whatever you're rolling out is done in a consistent manner, and that you kind of generally do it for the greater good without causing more problems than you solve. So the kind of processes you might want to look at, I said about data quality being perhaps your primary and first reason for implementing data governance. So if you're going to try and improve the quality of your data, how are you going to know unless you're measuring that and reporting that to people? So you would hopefully look to be doing data quality reporting. And the other one I always put in, regardless of what I'm doing, and normally first actually, is data quality issue resolution. Because there's no point standing there saying, we're going to put in data governance, we're going to improve the quality of the data. If somebody says, well, I've got a problem with this data, what do I do about it? And you go, well, I don't know. Go and talk to your data owner. You need a proper process to make sure that things are reported centrally, and also to get away from this fixing things where you find them. You should always go and solve the source of these things, not claims repeatedly. You mentioned master data management earlier. If you're doing master data management, if any of you are, you'll have heard countless times now, you can't be successful at master data management without data governance. I totally agree with them. I've been involved in projects that both have had and haven't, and have asked me to come in at the end to try and sort things out. So it is absolutely vital. So if you have got master data management in your organisation, there's another set of processes that are data governance related that you would want to adopt. You can do these if you aren't doing master data management. It is such a huge undertaking though, you might find it really hard to get buy-in to actually start doing these things. And finally, just a really, really simple one, and it sounds really stupid, but But I told you that things will evolve as you go on, so your data governance framework needs to evolve as you travel through and become more mature. So somebody needs to have responsibility for reviewing the data governance framework and seeing, are things still right, do things need to change and move on for whatever reason. Your business might change, it might not just be your approach to managing data. You might have new data, you might have new systems, new problems as a result of that. Or less problems, we can always live in hope. So, anything there that surprises you, bewilders you? It's just too early in the morning for such a fast-track dump of information on you. But finally, and I think the most important people in data governance is the roles and responsibilities. Now, I will keep an eye on time. I think I had to about 10:05 anyway, didn't I? So I'm not too far off. I know I'm talking very, very quickly. So I think there's 6 kinds of roles that you want, and the ones that you can see in front of you are the ones that I start with. I don't get hung up about the names. These are the names that I think in when I'm talking to you. But if you don't like calling them that, I really have learned that doesn't matter. I used to waste a huge amount of my energy trying to convince you to be a data owner. And you didn't, when I was kind of not really listening, and then it finally worked out because you didn't like the title. It's nothing to do with the responsibilities. So let's call it whatever you want. So I've had clients call it executive data steward, or they've used the term data steward to be what I call data owner. So it's the what these people are doing that's more important. So a data owner is probably the most key role in all of this. That's somebody that's fairly senior in your organisation, if not very senior, if you can manage it. And they're the person that the buck stops there. They are accountable for a set of data. If you've got them at the right level, they're going to be too senior to get their hands dirty with the data. Or they may not even be that close to the detail that they even understand it if it got down to that level. So they're going to need support, and that's where I let them have one or more data stewards. So these will be people a little bit more junior, but equally will have the authority to review data quality reports, get things changed if they need to. So they're business people. Is anybody here from IT? It's getting better. The more I talk to people at events like this, I think there's a growing understanding that data governance should sit in the business. But quite frequently, it starts in IT because IT see the problems that the data's creating, and they're blamed for it when it's not even their data. So it's okay to start your data governance initiative from IT, but you really need to make sure that business are engaged and take on the ownership of their data and worrying about it. Now, I believe that everybody in your organisation has responsibilities for data governance, mainly with the exception of the cleaner. But you're going to be talking about, that's why I have 2 roles up there that I call a data producer and a data consumer. Data producers are the people that capture and enter data or create data from other data. Now, quite often these are really, really junior people, and they could be in call centres, but regardless of where they are, they're normally very remote, in a nice little silo from the people that are consuming that data. And there's often this disconnect in communications. And it's always easy to blame the poor data producer. It's most definitely their fault, because they put the data in wrong. But you have to kind of say, well, did anybody tell them what made that data right? I don't believe that they should be made to be telepathic. So I don't have the role of data consumer. So if you're using data for whatever purpose in your organisation, it's up to you to define what makes it good enough for you to use. And that then needs to be communicated to data producers, and then they can be held accountable for collecting it to that. Yes?
Why don't you make producers responsible for the quality?
Well, they're the ones that, or would you say, why don't I? So I make them responsible for the quality of what they're capturing, but somebody has to give them the rules by which it needs to be captured, because they won't be necessarily the people that are consuming it. Sometimes they are, but quite often they're not, which is why I split the 2. So the consumers have to say what makes it good enough for what they're using it for. If they're not capturing it and entering it into a system, then they have to communicate that to the people who are responsible for doing it in accordance with their wishes.
The other point I find on that is that data consumers are much more highly motivated to set standards of what they need to do their job, rather than the producer who doesn't necessarily know what the consumers think.
No, that's very true. It's like I was saying with that silo, people just don't know. I think when I first implement the data quality issue process at companies, it's really amusing. Normally, within the first couple of issues that get reported, you get something like this one that I had a couple of years ago, where someone said, The spreadsheet we get from finance every quarter is rubbish. It takes us 2 weeks every quarter to reformat it and cleanse it before we can use it. And I said, oh, okay, well, can you be a little bit more, subjective, give me the detail of what makes it rubbish? I can't just turn up at finance and say your spreadsheet is rubbish. So they told me that it was inconsistent formatting, duplicate data, missing columns. So okay, fine. And I said, okay, so what do finance say? Because I naively assumed that they would get me involved because finance either couldn't or wouldn't fix it. And they just looked blankly at me. They went, what do you mean? What does finance say about the state of this spreadsheet? Why can't they do it in accordance with your wishes? And they just went, oh, well, I've never spoken to finance. I've been here 18 months, and when I joined, somebody said my job as the most junior person on the team was to reformat this spreadsheet. So get this right. You're being paid for 2 weeks every quarter just to reformat the spreadsheet, but we could actually ask the people that give it to us to put it right in the first place. And he went, now you say it like that, I realise how stupid that sounds. But it's exactly what Mum said. There's just this disconnect. Get a spreadsheet from finance, it never occurred to them that finance should be told what they needed. And that was a senior team, that wasn't somebody on both sides that was very junior in the organisation. If you are in IT, I don't let you totally off the hook. I have a role called data custodians because I believe that you should maintain and look after the data in accordance with the business requirements. So this still puts the onus back on the business because they like to say it's IT's fault, it's on the system, but it's not. But you need to say, this is what we want, this is how we want it protected and held, and if we're moving it from system A to system B, this is how we want you to check that all the records go across or that we aggregated it correctly, something like that. If you're working in a company that still feels very strongly that IT owns your business, I'd avoid introducing this role until later. Because I've done that and somebody's immediately gone, see, told you, IT own the data. So what you do, if you think that's going to be an issue, don't introduce that role. Talk to the IT guys, they never, ever argue against you because you're helping them, you're making their life easier. So they will quite happily undertake this role without a label. In one organisation, we actually got rounded by the CIO agreeing to be a data owner because the company were absolutely adamant that they had to have an IT data owner as well. So I said to the CIO, I think you're being a data custodian, but are you happy if we give you a badge that says data owner and you can come along to our Data Governance Council as an IT data owner? And he was fine by me, and it worked fine. So it's just a kind of managing the names and titles so that people feel happy, but you've got the right roles and responsibilities. And much as I said we needed a process for the data governance framework, somebody's got to be responsible for it. The one thing you have to remember, it's not a project. You might have a project to implement it, but you don't want it to go away. If you go away, we'll go back to where we were before. And people think, thank God that mad woman stopped bugging me about data quality. I can go back to how I did it before. You don't want that. So you need somebody in your organisation that's responsible for your data governance framework, for checking that it's working properly, that perhaps data owners have moved on and you might need to go and find some new ones and brief them and get them engaged, that type of thing. So I think there's one more role that I don't include on my slide yet. Who here has a chief data officer? Oh, that's lower numbers than some organisations, some events that people put their hand on.
We've got 50.
Yes, I was going to say. Some organisations make an industry out of CDOs, big banks in the UK in particular, not just your one. And then they end up having a chief data office to manage the chief data officers, which I find is really interesting. I think this is a role that you don't have to have. I think it's very much an evolving, emerging role, has the potential to be useful, but I think people are still getting their head around it. So ideally, it should be the executive person with responsibility for sponsoring all the data management activities in your organisation. Quite often that doesn't happen. I know of one bank who I don't think is represented here today, so it's all right, there's nobody in the room, who went through 3 CDOs in 18 months for their wholesale banking division. Because it was a bit like the data owner story I told you. They went, welcome sir, you can be our CEO, our data's rubbish, you can sort it out, thanks. They didn't give him a job description, they didn't give him any budget or resources or any actual authority to go and do anything. So 6 months later, they pitched up at your desk and went, why is our data still rubbish? Bye. They did that another time before they realised they might have been slightly to blame for what was going wrong and not the poor person on the end of that. So it's still a role where people get their heads around. I think it's just more important you have an executive sponsor sponsoring your data governance programme, not the CDO. If you have a CDO, great, make sure they're involved and that they are your executive sponsor. sponsor. But if you haven't got one, I don't think the first thing is to rush out and get one. They're expensive people. You're much better off using that to get some more lower people who can actually go and do the work and get it happening in your organisation. So, you know, employ yourself a data governance manager that can learn and grow with your company and actually do some stuff. There's probably loads of people going to shoot me for saying that. But I know of several big consultancies that do a data review and they immediately tell you need a chief data officer and they'll help you recruit for it. So, not me being too cynical, but I think it has potential to be a powerful role that you don't have to have when you just need senior support. So I think that brings me virtually to the end and not too far over. So any final questions? But say I'm around all day, so there's breaks and lunchtimes and over at last time later as well.
Quick question, you haven't mentioned data lineage. Do you see that as an important element of data governance?
I do, yes. So data lineage is a data governance deliverable. I knew that in 20 minutes I wasn't going to get to do all the data governance deliverables. So data lineage, if anybody doesn't know, is the data flows. So it's how you document how data moves from one system to another. I think it's a key deliverable of data governance. I think it's even harder than a data glossary to sell to the business unless you have to for regulatory reasons. So I think it's very valuable to know where your data is and where it moves through your organisation. But I haven't yet been successful proposing a project to do it unless it's been for regulatory reasons and the regulators ask for it. What I do is when my data quality issue resolution process, every time you have a data quality issue, by definition you're working out a little bit of the data lineage by tracking back where the data came from and what the problem was. So I start building it iteratively as I go.
Whose responsibility would it be? Data custodian or is it broader?
I would, because I wouldn't, you do have systems obviously on there, but I would put it as your data governance manager or team or whatever it is. I would sit with them with the support of our team.
And data quality team.
And data quality team if they're separate. They're often, by the time you get to BAU, quite often it's your data quality manager that takes over and runs it, or you don't have a data governance manager. They're normally involved in the early stages while you're less mature. But definitely business.
Out of the clients that you've gone through, and with all the different facets that you've gone through, how many have you seen that have a centralised or a more automated kind of tool or system required for this? Otherwise, this system, it's all manual, and then you have to join it places that actually add value in the whole end of it.
So that's a good question. I would say, up until about 5 years ago, there were no tools that would help you do data governance. There are now quite a few. I think they enable data governance and facilitate it. They make it easier for you, but they don't do it for you. Data governance is primarily about the people and the processes and not the tool.
It becomes a scalability issue.
Yes. Yeah, so there's only so much you can do with spreadsheets and PowerPoint. But so I've only actually seen one do it whole scale with a product, and even then it's still early days. So the actual data governance is more mature than their use of the tool, if that makes sense. So I think they can help, and I think the tools have come on leaps and bounds in the last couple of years. So I think we will see more of that, but they're not cheap. And it's hard enough to build a business case of data governance, let alone say, by the way, I need this tool as well. So it's going to be better to, I think, get going, then get to that stage where you can say, actually, yes, it's expensive to buy the tool, but we've got a team of X people running around sorting this. If we had a tool, it wouldn't take so much, and then you've got a better case to move on to the tool and do that. Anything else?
How do you go about, where there are no data owners, and then you go about telling them that you should be the data owner. But in an organization where the data changes, in its life cycle, it starts with someone probably entering it, someone else starts with it. In such cases, different owners, they don't have support, right? My scope is to own the data, how do you go about choosing?
So a very quick answer, it's more convoluted than this, is I find data owners initially at a conceptual level. So I say, you're the finance director, you own finance data, don't you? And you say, yes. And I don't define it. We just agree that you own finance data. And some of that might be really detailed stuff that's collected in a system miles away from you. And some of it might be stuff that your team creates when it consumes data from other people. But we just kind of put that label on them. It's finance data. And it's the data that you get upset about that's wrong. So I try to find data owners by who feels the pain that it goes wrong and who shouts. And then as you become more mature and the right systems come up that help you define the details. So if you're putting in place master data management, like we were speaking earlier, or any new system, that's the time to start getting more detailed because you have to do definitions, you agree the data owners, but if you've got it at a conceptual level, it's easier. You can use the conceptual data owners, I never call them that to their face, but kind of to signpost who you go to talk to. Say, I've got all these, I think these might be yours, do you agree? And they've already agreed at the high level, it's very hard for them to back out in the detail there. It takes a bit longer than that.
I mean, that's one of the difficulties I've seen in organisations, the definition of ownership, the difference between owning the description of the data and what is a valid piece of data compared to the content of the value in that. And if someone in finance is responsible for how the data should be treated in the organisation, they're not also responsible necessarily for how it's reported or what value goes in there, which has a kind of liability associated with it. So it can get quite, in my experience anyway.
Yeah, it does, and that's why I start high level and do the detail as the right things come up, because you probably wouldn't even give permission to start if you told everybody you were going to do everything down to the nth level of detail. But you're right, it does. That's why data governance takes so long, because you're talking about cultural change and you're trying to get all this detail added as you work through it. So we've got time for one more. Or should we? Yes. One more, you said something.
Just the way I'm receiving it, you seem to be drawing the definition of data governance rather tighter than the definition that's in the DMBOK. Because you seem to be talking specifically about data owners being responsible for data quality, for example, rather than, I think the data owner who's responsible for the data, like who's authorised to use it, and all the security issues that go around all the records management and all the stuff that you.
So the DMBOK has that's different data management disciplines, like we said to go back. So the DMBOK does split off and have all that as separate sections. So the DMBOK data governance section is a bit longer than I said, but this lady is a key contributor to it. So it's that I suppose confusion people have about the data governance just is the roles and responsibilities and sits in the middle. All those other things look to those roles. So your data owner might well, as well as worrying about defining that data and what makes it good enough, might well determine who has access and who shouldn't have access and how that data is used. But that's another bit that just adds in the lines to it rather than being data governance. That makes sense. Would you agree, Sue?
Yeah, I'd probably just add to it that the slide that showed you 6 owners is a great place to stop because it's simple, it's light, and you're not going to scare the pants off everybody in the organisation. Once you've got them to accept that, then go to the next level. It's a seduction, okay? Please understand, data governance is actually a seduction. And I think anyone who's tried to do it multiple times in multiple organisations will agree. It takes time and effort, but you start light and you drill down.
Add the detail as you go. Excellent. So no more questions, otherwise I'll get into trouble with Julian. But say I'm around all day, happy to answer questions. My contact details are kind of there. But if you are enthusiastic about data governance rather than just here because somebody sent you, I do write a blog on data governance. And my favourite bit is the interviews that I do with other data governance gurus. They always have some great tips that they're happy to share, so I think that's great. So I'm not apologise for my own content. To add to the prize draw that everybody, I believe, was mentioning earlier, I'm actually just launching an online version of my data governance course that I usually get run face-to-face. So I'm going to add one free place on that into the prize draw. So I don't know if you want to do that separately or just...
We're going to do that towards the end of the day.
Yeah.
Put it in, put it an
just
envelope on it?
Yeah, so we'll put a separate envelope. If you want to be included in that, let us know, and we'll, just at the same time as the draw, we'll announce the winner for that. So thank you very much. If you have any other questions, just shout during the day.